Welcome to Innovator Café, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. Through each episode, Dave and his guests provide resources and assurances to build a company growth roadmap. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website stevenslawgroup.com. Now here's the host of Innovator Café, Dave Stevens.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Innovator Café. Today, we are very lucky to have our guest, Diane DiMusto. Diane is a consultant to CEOs and other executives, but she has a very interesting background and a really interesting perspective she's going to share today. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing right now.
Sure. So I have a background in business leadership. It is primarily in strategy and operations. And I am now an executive coach. And really what that is helping to do is helping leaders perform at their best within their business organizations.
Well, tell me about, so you coach a leader. What does that entail? How much time do you spend? What do you do when you coach an executive?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically when you start an engagement, there's a goal of the engagement overall. And
Right.
that goal is for executive coaching is typically something to do with leadership behavior. So it might be that they want to communicate with more executive presence. It might be that they want to delegate better. They might, want to have more empathy with their team. There's sometimes people can be a little rougher on the edges, those types of things. And so there's a goal that you're working towards in terms of adjusting some leadership behaviors that you have. And typically you would meet on a regular cadence. Sometimes at the beginning of an engagement, you would do an assessment, some 360 to get some information from other people in the organization, and then meet on a regular cadence to basically talk about that topic. And the typical part of the first part of the engagement is really around building awareness. It's building awareness of what are your existing behaviors. And that awareness allows you to then have choice. So if you're in a moment where your natural reaction, your kind of already wired neural pathway is to react in a certain manner, building that awareness of what happens creates choice to then take a different path. So then typically you start to make some adjustments to how you're reacting and in service of whatever goal you have. So I can give you one example if it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
With one of the clients I'm working with, she takes on too much for her team and is really challenged with empowering her team to do more problem solving. And what her typical behavior is when they bring her a challenge, is she immediately jumps in and starts to solve it for them. And so we've worked on creating some awareness around that behavior and what happens for her in that moment so that she can then have choice. And we've successfully moved into a posture where now when her team brings her something, she takes a breath and says, okay, what would you like me to do about this? What role would you like me to play in this particular situation? And quite often it's usually, oh, I'm just venting. So it's really been a game changer for her to be able to respond in that manner, as opposed to taking it on herself and kind of reaching this burnout point. So it's been a game changer for her to empower her team to solve it themselves and not feel like she has to take on that additional work.
Right. I have to admit, I fall victim to that myself. Right. And often I have this back, this emotion of urgency. This has to get done. Right. And I don't have time to delegate or wait. And I have this answer. You probably coach them to fight those feelings like you would me. Right.
Yeah. I mean, there is a thought process that immediately kicks off, right, when that trigger happens. And so it's about creating that just microsecond of awareness of, okay, I have choice. I can choose to respond in that way, or I can choose to respond differently. And so that's why it all starts with awareness. Is like if you raise awareness of those situations and the patterns you have, it then allows you to take a different path.
Sure. Oh my gosh. So, well, the earlier you do this, the better off these people are. No doubt about it. Right. Make them much more successful. And where else would this executive go? I mean, they don't talk to their reports and vent to them, right? How are they going to tell me about my behavior? That's not how the world works, is it?
Yeah. And it's interesting because coaching is so accepted in a lot of different fields.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, in leadership, it's been a little slower to be adopted. But if you think of being the best at anything that you're trying to do, what do? You get a coach. You know, if you want to improve your golf swing, there's only so much you can do on your own. You get a coach to help you with that because they have some expertise in the area. And I always say that the two biggest things that a coach can do for you is, number one, is provide you with that external perspective, that kind of trustworthy mirror of what are you doing. You can't always know how you're being perceived, right? There's this kind of saying,
No.
you can't read the label on your own cookie jar. So a coach really helps you with that, right? They get that perspective and they're interacting with you. So, you know, you can see live how someone is coming off and being perceived. And having that trustworthy mirror is really valuable, especially for leaders who don't get that from a lot of other sources. And then the second thing I think is accountability. You know, if you're trying to shift a behavior, it's really challenging to just, you know, wake up one day and shift it. If that worked, you know, we wouldn't have this challenge in any arena of our life.
Right.
But our natural tendencies are to go through the worn paths, the thing that feels easiest for us, the neural pathways that have already been formed. And so having the accountability of someone that's going to really sit there and say, okay, this is the thing we're working on. How do we do in these particular scenarios? And what happened between the last time we met and now? So
yeah, we all know these people in our lives who have this ceiling in their career, right?
Mhm.
And they keep hitting the ceiling, and often, you know, you kind of see why. You know, it's a personality thing. Not that everybody's difficult necessarily, but there's just ways of doing things better. And who else is going to tell it? Trust is a big factor, isn't it?
Absolutely. And having that trusting relationship between a coach and a client is so important. It's foundational for everything that all the work that you will do together is really forming that trustworthy relationship.
Sure. Well, yeah, and look, you're coaching these top tier executives. There's a bit of ego there, isn't there? Right? Trust factor probably doesn't come so easy.
Yeah, sometimes I think a lot of people have gotten to where they are because they are either mistrusting or skeptical.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things that is a barrier to breakthrough is what got you here won't get you there. Otherwise, you'd be there already. And so there is a notion of, you know, you have to sometimes pivot. You have to create new behaviors to get to that next level or to get to just being more effective. Even if you're maybe the CEO already and you just need to be more effective with your team, or maybe out in the world getting investment, et cetera, then, you know, there is some behavior change that usually can help with that. No one's perfect. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. And sure, your strengths become your weaknesses when you
Mhm.
reach these higher levels, don't they?
Yeah, well, if you over-index in any direction, you know, it's you over-rely on something, then it can have kind of liability effects. So yeah, absolutely.
Sure. I had a client, without mentioning names here, very, very successful guy, billionaire. And I remember going into his office, CEO of a big company, and everyone around him sat there in fear. In this,
Mm,
no one would make eye contact. I met him for the first time. I'm talking to him. I'm counseling him. I looked around. Everybody's got their head down their laptop, right? Fear was his tool, let's say his weapon or something like that. It kept people in line, right?
yeah.
And that can work for some people, but you'd have to have a lot of control. But it's not a very good teacher. It's not a very good leadership tool.
Yeah, and how much more could he get out of his team if he was motivating in a different way, right? And
It's a good
that's
point.
the question.
So how? Okay. So let's say that this guy calls you in and he feels like his company's having a ceiling and he puts the pressure on you and says, listen, I need to improve this. I've got people who are just running around in fear and they're not performing. What do I do?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we would start very much with what's the problem statement? Sounds like,
Yep.
this fear-based culture and some goals of what we want to do to shift that fear-based culture, and then start to build awareness of when's it happening, why is it happening, and for example, it probably is that he has an internal narrative around like having to maintain control or something
Yep.
along those lines, and that this being the best way to do it is. And so it would be adjusting that narrative to say, like, okay, what are the other possibilities? What scenarios have you seen success where you've been able to release a little bit and really let go to an extent that you're not putting people in this fear state, but you've felt supported. What has worked for you when you've needed to get to the next level? Is someone kind of reprimanding you or feeling supported? What works? And changing that internal dialogue is really the key to changing then the external behavior. It is the way we think and is very much the way we act. And so
Sure.
it starts with that internal narrative that we all have, and kind of our quieting our inner critics and getting the more supportive, useful voices to be louder in those scenarios.
No kidding. Well, tell us about another one of your success stories of someone that you've coached.
Yeah. So there's quite a gamut of scenarios that people will arrive with. I'll use another one where it's actually more relational, and someone was in a scenario where they were having a really hard time getting through to their boss, and just constantly under kind of this pressure cooker.
Mhm.
And really what we worked on was having those crucial conversations where he was constantly shying away from addressing what needed to be addressed.
Right.
And that's why he wasn't necessarily getting through. And so, there is some courage that it takes to have these crucial conversations, but there's also some proven elements of what you can do to add to shared meaning, add to a pool of meaning, get people on the same page towards the same intent, communicate your positive intent. And so we started working with some of those tools, and essentially helping plan out how he would have these conversations, not word by word, but just kind of the themes, the things that he wanted to make sure were heard. And he started having them and really just getting his message through much more effectively, and repairing that relationship to a level where there was trust, because there was no trust at the beginning between
Clearly.
the two of
Mhm.
them. And so, if you're not speaking your truth, you're not kind of saying what's on your mind, it's very hard
Mhm.
to build trust. And so having that skill of being able to have a crucial conversation when it's important is something I work a lot with my clients on.
Give us an example of the first conversation you pushed him into.
Well, pushed into is not necessarily the right
Well, I
term.
mean, that's not the right word. But the guy needed a push,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It was about a particular meeting that happened pretty regularly, and this other individual essentially like talking over him and constantly being just almost like a bully in that particular environment. And so, and it was important not only because of their relationship, but then it also, there was other people on this meeting, and so it reflected
They
really.
sat there in fear,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And so that was where we started. Is it's a very tangible. You start with the facts, put them on the table. Like you spoke over me when I was making this point, not trying to take out the charge. Say the whole reason I'm having this conversation is because I want to make sure we have a great working relationship. And pushing towards, like, let's just say I have an issue, right? And I need
Yeah.
to raise this with you. So we started with something relatively, it seems small, but it has a big knock-on effect, because it's like once you start having those types of conversations, opening the door, it just builds a lot of trust between people and allows you to have the bigger conversations that
I see. So you got him to focus on the method of conversation. Start with something small. It doesn't even matter what it is, does it?
not really. I mean, it matters that there are enough facts to back it up, that you don't
Yeah.
have to say, hey, you don't have to debate what happened, right?
Yes.
That is
Right.
the important part, is you need to have something that it's like, okay, we were both there. Here's what happens. And then here is the challenge that I have with that. And you can start the dialogue from there. I think that some of the challenge a lot of people have with having these types of conversations is they don't start with facts. They start with, oh, I felt so and so, which can
Yep.
absolutely be brought into the conversation. But you have to start with, like, here's what happened, and here's the story I'm telling myself about that. I think that you don't care about my opinion. You interrupted me, and I don't know why you did that, but the story I told myself was that you don't value my opinion. And then they have an opportunity to say, oh no, that's not it at all. I just had a thought that I thought I'd lose if I didn't say it right then and there. Okay, now that's a whole different conversation than,
Totally.
oh, you don't value my opinion. So, there's a myriad of these situations, but when you just have your own perspective and no one to talk it out with, to figure out, how you're going to address these relational challenges, you really get caught up in your own story. And it's a skill to be able to address these kind of leadership behaviors, as I'll broadly categorize them. And having a coach really can help you with developing that skill set.
Oh, that's great. Yes. And also you're right. You get caught up in that scenario, right? You end up with that cycle, and it's really a cycle, isn't it? And it doesn't break. And you end up falling into this victimhood, or you feel like, okay, I'm really stuck in this barrier. I just have to deal with this. Right.
Absolutely. You're stuck on a spin cycle almost. And, coaching can really help you break the spin cycle.
Right. Right. Well, that must have been a hard one too, because here you got a person who's trying to affect and shine a light on the behavior of someone else.
Mhm.
The coach teaching the coach, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you can only affect your own behavior, but that's why in that scenario, what we focused on is what conversation he wanted to have.
Yep.
Because I don't know why the other person is behaving this way. I don't know what their motivation is, and we can't hypothesize about it, right? So it's all
Right.
about, well, how do you want to handle that? How do you want to react? And how do
Mhm.
you want to adjust your own behavior to improve the situation? When often that will involve, speaking up.
That's so interesting. I mean, from a leader standpoint, I mean, companies could have layers and layers, many reports to you in the hierarchy. And if you establish, sounds like a coaching culture, right?
Mhm.
Then things can run very smoothly. I mean, you could work up and down the hierarchy, couldn't you?
Absolutely. More and more, we see organizations that are offering coaching to more levels within the organization.
Yeah,
It started with the most senior levels, and I think primarily because they don't have as many support mechanisms.
sure.
But now, very much, directors, managers, and we aren't taught a lot of
Mhm.
these things. Even if you get promoted because you're good at your particular function, but you're
Right.
not necessarily taught all of the leadership skills that go along with that. And
Sure.
many organizations will try to have leadership development programs, but there's so many case by case scenarios, and that's where a coach can really help a particular individual with a particular goal move the needle in that domain.
Okay. I've seen a lot of entrepreneur stuff. I work mostly with entrepreneurs, right?
Mhm.
And probably the biggest struggle I've seen is where someone might inherit a business or take it over, whether it's from family or taking it over from some other means, right? Well, here they're put in this driver's seat and they've never driven it before, right?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
and now they're dealing with people in different scenarios and they're not trained to do it.
Absolutely. Founders, it's one of the most challenging use cases because they're passionate about what they're putting out into the world, whatever they've, founded a company for, or,
Yep.
continue a family business. But they don't have the leadership training to necessarily back that up. And they also are typically, kind of these type A overachievers, and a
Right.
lot of leadership. It's not necessarily those skills, right? It's kind of what I was saying before about what got you here won't get you there. At
Right.
some point, you need to be able to lead other people to do those functions and not be doing them yourself. Otherwise, you'll burn out, and it's not a recipe for success.
Right. They continue to divide themselves rather than to multiply themselves. Right.
Exactly.
Right. It's a hard thing to do. Yeah. Well, I work with mostly startups, and they're typically engineers,
Yeah.
right? Coders and things like that. And I've been through both educations, and I know that in engineering school they don't teach a whole lot about leadership, right?
No, it's the more technical skills, and that's
Yes.
true of almost every domain. Is you get taught the more technical skills, and not always the leadership skills that you need at some point within your career. And so that's really, a coach can make a substantial difference in being an effective leader.
Right. Yeah, sure. So it's not necessarily the leadership career skills that got you in that position. It's somehow the results you got. You don't always get those with your leadership skills, do you?
You don't, but at some point, when you become a leader, you're no longer doing the coding in most scenarios, right? You're
Right.
helping other people do the coding, and you need to, be able to have effective communication. You need to be able to motivate your team. You need to have executive presence in a lot of cases. There are other skill sets that you need to have that maybe you haven't picked up along the way, and you need someone to help work on those with you.
Right.
The other really common scenario I see is people just getting into this state of overwhelm, I'll
Yep.
broadly call it. And it's such a contractive state, right? It's really hard to problem solve when you're overwhelmed, because you
Oh,
just have
sure.
no space for it. You have no space to be creative. And so one of the other things that coaching can help with is helping to move you from that overwhelmed state into a state that's a little bit more expansive and gives you room for problem solving, creativity, and really getting to the next level of solutioning as well.
Mhm.
And I think this is particularly a problem in the founder scenario, where it's like, I have so much to do, I don't even know where to begin. And it's not about the actual tasks, it's about the state of mind that you're in that moment, because it's like you absolutely do know the answer to those things. It's just you're
Right.
so on the spin cycle, kind of like what you talked about before, that it's really hard to get off the spin cycle and just start doing. You're like spinning. And so, yeah, that's another area that a coach could help plug in.
Yeah, it seems like what the overwhelmed state is, and I will admit that I'm often in there, right? This is part of what I do, and many of us get there anyway, and we have to find our ways out of them. Is that you become overwhelmed, and you're less capable of having these human to human conversations. I mean, capable. You're not as skilled. You're so caught up in your morass that you're more reactive in these conversations. And how do you break that?
Yeah, it's again, it starts with awareness, right?
Yep.
So recognizing that you're in that state. And then there are a lot of techniques that are essentially mindfulness. It is bringing you into the present, taking a deep breath. It takes 10 seconds, it could be even less, to take a few deep breaths. And that really puts your body into a different state, puts your nervous system into more of a parasympathetic state, where you're not so much in this fight or flight response. And it just allows you to have that microsecond of expansion, choice. And so it starts with that awareness of like, oh, okay, I'm getting pretty worked up right now. Let me just like take a breath, maybe look out the window for a second, and then like come back and say, okay, now what am I going to do about this problem, or how am I going to respond, or and it's that microsecond really makes all the difference, because it gives you the ability to see more paths rather than just taking the one that is immediately the one you've taken for the last few decades in terms of response.
Yeah, your go-to shot, your go-to. So let's talk about that microsecond. You talked a while ago with me about how yoga, your skills in yoga can apply to this process. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yoga is fundamentally also about creating awareness of your inner landscape, and really it's helping you to create that space. And there are a lot of principles of practicing yoga that really can be almost a metaphor for other areas of life, and in particular leadership. And I'll use an example that might resonate with your entrepreneurial audience.
Mm-hmm.
There's this concept in yoga that is about the balance of effort and ease. It's called sthira and sukha. And really, if you think of, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm trying to bring something to market. You need to keep that effort and ease in mind, because if you're, if in this case, an efforting would be, of course, building your products, finding your buyers, really like getting in front of them. And the ease would be that there is a demand statement, that you have product market fit, and that you're differentiated. And so if you go too far in either direction on that, if let's say you're efforting too much, is you're producing, but you don't have that strong product market fit, is you'll burn out, you'll burn through cash. Like there's not an easefulness of like, oh, this is working. It's, the flywheel is going. And if you're too easeful, then, and you're like, wow, we have a great product market fit, and you kind of rest on your laurels and you're not efforting to put out new product and innovate, then
It's going to run itself.
Your competitors will eat your lunch, right? They'll say, oh, well, we can build that and we can do it better. And, your customers are also evolving. And so it's really about maintaining that balance. And there's just such yoga has such a rich metaphor for a lot of the like fundamental principles of living a good life, being a good leader. And so I'm actually working on a book that explores that as a metaphor of how to be the best leader that you can be. So I'm working on writing that now.
Through yoga.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much wisdom. There's so much, thousands of years of wisdom that's really rolled into the practice of yoga. And yoga goes beyond just the postures. It really is more of a philosophical kind of practice. And so I'm incorporating a lot of there's a concept of 8 limbs. So I'm incorporating the 8 limbs within yoga as a metaphor for being, a great business leader, and how you can apply that in different scenarios. So.
Right. So when you're taking that deep breath, you're exercising those yoga skills and centering yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Centering is such a great word. It's it really is about, having that posture of being centered and deciding which way you're going to move, as opposed to, a posture of being a little off balance, a little, too far in one direction, a little over your skis, or a little bit like too far behind. And so really, yeah, acting in that centered state is where you want to be taking action from.
Well, they're good metaphors, not just in words, right? But when you're doing it physically, it gives you this reminder, like a symbol of yourself, right?
Absolutely. And there's also just a discipline that comes along with a yoga practice. And, the fact that it is a practice, you're never perfect. And I work with a lot of people on perfectionism. There is no perfect. We have a tendency in our society to aim for this perfectionism that, it just doesn't exist in reality. There is no perfect. And so it's always better to be practicing and moving forward and taking that improvement mentality, that continuous improvement mentality, than to be aiming for some beacon of perfection that just doesn't really exist.
Sure. Perfectionism, and it is that elusive concept that everybody's really aiming for, right? And it can be awfully frustrating if that's all you have in your mind. You're not just lopsided. You're going to frustrate yourself because nothing will ever be good enough.
Nothing will ever be good enough. And it paralyzes a lot of people. They could have put out a lot of great concepts, content, products, but
Mhm.
they're looking for the perfect idea or the perfect, manifestation of that, and so
Right.
they wait and pause, and yeah, it really does paralyze a lot of individuals.
Yeah, or they slip into what you said earlier, that state of overwhelm.
Exactly. Instead of just being centered and taking one step forward, it's, in this state of overwhelm where you can't move in any direction because you're so off balance that you don't know where to go. You're kind of off kilter.
Right. Right. So give us an example of skills where I'm overwhelmed, completely overwhelmed, and I feel like there's no step forward. I just need to walk away. Right. What's the first? Give an example of a skill that's going to snap me out of that state and a practice that can send me on the right direction and send me back to balance. Practical
Yeah,
example.
it's mindfulness techniques. So the easiest one is this connecting to your breath and connecting to what's happening in the present, connecting back to your body. So it's you're in the state of overwhelm, you don't know what to do. It's the taking the deep breath, but also, where do you feel it in your body? Where do you feel that sense of overwhelm? Is it like a pressure on your shoulders? Is it a contraction of your chest? And just feeling that and breathing into it, it allows you to be present in the moment and essentially work through the feeling instead of shoving it down. And then once you work through that feeling, it puts you into actually a different mental state to be able to access more optionality, access more decision points. And so it's taking that time. It's like recognizing that you are overwhelmed and you need to be in a different mental state to be effective. And
Right.
so it's the like cutting yourself out of it and like taking your, I don't know, 30-second, maybe 5 minutes if you have it, and taking that rest, and then coming back to whatever you need to problem solve, coming back to whatever you need to take action on, and being in a more relaxed nervous system.
Right. Right. The increased heartbeat, the noise in your head, right? You have to shake, even, take a walk, right? You're more of an expert of this than I am, but you really have to step away from those feelings. Otherwise, you're stuck there, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And changing your physical landscape for even a couple of minutes can really change how you feel internally. Like, you get up and, like you said, take a walk or change your posture. It actually changes. There's a constant communication that's going on between your body and your mind. And
Yep.
so often it's easier to change your body first, and that will help adjust your mind, than it is to override whatever thought process you have going on in your mind and
No
then your
kidding.
body following. So that's part of the reason that things like, power postures or, even taking a walk work, is because it's signaling to your body, like, either in the power posture scenario, it's like signaling to your body, like, I'm powerful, I'm expansive, I'm ready for this. And taking a walk signals, like, I'm safe, I'm in an environment that I can, be free and be able to move. And so moving your body in those ways, it just signals to your brain something different than if you're, let's say, at your desk hunched over and you're
Right.
just constantly kind of thinking, and you've got this pressure that you feel on your shoulders and you don't somehow shake it off. Then
Right.
your brain doesn't have your brain sending you signals to your body, which is hunching, and then your body sending you back saying, yep, we're afraid, we're contracted. And so if you can move your body into more of an expansive state, it's often a quicker path to kind of getting your thoughts to then expand as well.
Yeah, it sounds like it levitates you above your thoughts, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it really is, like, we have so much information that's in our bodies that we, as the Western society in particular, have
Mhm.
been cut off from. We really, like, use only a portion of the information that we have in our heads and have been almost cut off at the neck in terms of using the rest
Right.
of the information that we have. I mean, it's the whole concept of like, something in your gut.
Yes.
That concept is very much backed by science, that there's a reason your gut is telling you that it can process information extremely quickly and process more pieces of information than our brain can, in terms of, the thinking fast and slow. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book, but it's kind of the like gut instinct versus the like logic prefrontal cortex brain.
Mm-hmm.
And our gut really does give us a lot of great information. It's like you walk into a room, you feel a little uneasy. You're like, ooh, I don't know if I want to do business with these people. And
Yes.
there's some reason, right, that's happening, right? It might be whatever they're giving off, what they're saying doesn't seem genuine, or you could be like, wow, I feel great. And that makes me feel like, yeah, I would really want to invest in this company, do business with these people. And our body gives us a lot of that information. And whether we acknowledge it or not, a lot of the information really is coming from our somatic experiencing.
I've often told my wife that she has a much better sense of a person's character than I do, just right off.
Yeah.
And I never really understood why. And I will tell you, most women I know, men, women, couples, there's a side that they understand more.
Mm-hmm.
Like for a woman, if she's the leader, if she's the one working there, another woman standing there, another person standing there and understands kind of this vibe they get. I know it sounds really superficial, but there is that sense when someone is being genuine,
Mm-hmm.
or if someone is giving you a story.
Yeah.
And you can't articulate it. There's too many factors. There's too much data there, right? But there's this gut, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wholeheartedly believe that is all information that our body is processing, and it's energetic that people are giving off, and it's kind of what makes us human, right? When we talk about AI, and the AI can do all the brain processing, or is getting close to a lot of that, but AI can't sense that someone's intentions or sense that someone's being genuine or not. And it's that energetic vibration that we're have as interplay. It's the minute details of, maybe it's a facial expression, maybe it's a body posture, or maybe it's just a sense, an energetic sense of how someone is being. But I really fundamentally believe that that's a lot of what makes us human.
Mm-hmm. Well, it gets back down to this trust factor. I mean, that's one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you meet someone, is this a person? You don't stop and say, hey, can I trust this person? Let me talk to him. No. You're meeting this person, and it's kind of building up, isn't it? It just happens. But there's something happening there. It's not just, it's kind of percolating. There's some information flowing there, isn't it? That you're not maybe even completely aware of.
Yeah, absolutely. And to bring it back to leadership, it's, how do you lead with authenticity, right?
Yeah.
How are you exuding a certain presence that is in alignment with, thoughts, feelings, that comes off as authentic, as opposed to you, trying to kind of put on a mask, or sell something that you don't believe in, or, that type of thing. It really comes off in your presence. And I think, again, coaching can help you align your leadership to be a more authentic leader in your space.
Sure. I would imagine this can happen through any organization, even sales. I mean, who hasn't met these salespeople who are just telling you the story, right?
Yeah.
Someone who's aware like you can see right through them, right? But if they're genuine, it's hard not to sign up, right?
Yeah, exactly. They say that people buy from people, and really it has way more to do with the person you're interacting with. That's why hiring the right salespeople is so important. That does with, sure, there's probably other products on the market that can do similar things. And a lot of it has to do with that authenticity of your salespeople. And can you feel that they believe in their own products? And, it comes off very, very clearly when there isn't that alignment. So hiring in sales is extremely important to get get that right.
Right. Right. I think a lot of people take that for granted. Well, certainly the people who are not salespeople. Like you have the
Yeah.
engineering crowd, you get the salespeople, and they think, what are they doing? They're out selling the thing that I built. Right.
Yeah. Well, and it's so important that there is a dialogue between those two groups, because the
Yep.
engineers that built it can probably do have a level of passion and conviction around the thing that they built. And so if they can convey that effectively to the sales team and get them to have conviction themselves, then that will help, increase the whole revenue of the company. So there is something to be said for then even just that internal communication, and how do you make that effective between groups.
That's brilliant too, because it's really both groups, they don't have to be diametrically opposed, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
could really be feeding each other, and you're sharing credit, aren't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there are, so many cultural elements to an organization, and
Yep.
the more that you can align your different groups towards the overarching mission or the overarching, goal of the company, it's just it really exudes in all parts of your performance. And that's part of being a good leader, is how do you align those groups? How do
Right.
you get them all on the same page and speaking the same language and sharing information, readily, and working together effectively?
Yeah, I've also seen clashes, and this is a really good scenario too to discuss this, where their goals may not be aligned. As far as leaders go, just as an example, the engineering and the sales.
Mhm.
If their goals are not aligned, they aren't working together. And they don't always have to be completely aligned, but you could have some of their goals aligned, so they're kind of forced to work together, right?
Mhm.
And share this input. Otherwise, salespeople are telling one story based on I don't know what, right? Maybe this customer feedback, but the engineers might be able to complete that story for them.
Absolutely. And you're making the case for kind of cascading goals, which is, you start,
Cascading goals. That's a
yeah,
great
you
term.
start at the top. You start at the top of, what is the company trying to achieve, and then how do you cascade that down to the different parts of the organization that can have impact on those particular overarching, 4 or 5 company goals. And absolutely, I think if you're not thinking about your goals that way, then you have the opportunity to really be at odds, because they're not rolling up to these, macro goals for your organization.
Sure, sure. And if they're opposed, you're going to have constant battles, and
Absolutely.
everybody's going to win because they're both going to be fighting for their separate goals, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are scenarios where you can still have some conflict over they might be towards the same end goal. And I think then, to the point of kind of managing conflict, is how can you get people focused on the overlap as opposed to the edges, right? Say like, okay, we
Right.
both want this 80%, and so like let's work on the 10% on either ends. But let's focus most of our energy on the overlap as opposed to most of our energy on the whatever is kind of at odds within those particular arenas.
Yeah, often there's a lot of credit given to a person who gets results,
Hmm.
right? And if they're getting these results on the fringe and they're very good at it, right? You have to be careful about how you give that credit, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's something to be conscious of. Is how is this feeding the overall organization and not just
Yeah.
serving the
You're
person?
doing great over here, but you're throwing the ship off balance, right? We need
Mhm.
to we need to also meet these goals here. It's not a B plus grade, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You need to cargo balance.
Cargo. That's right. I mean, I'm sure there's a better yoga term, but yeah, that's right. That's right. And you have to ultimately get the company goals. Otherwise, everybody loses.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Getting the ship in the right direction.
Right. Well, Diane, we're running out of time. It's been great. This has been very, very insightful. How about some last minute, some advice to entrepreneurs who can take these techniques and put them to work right away?
Yeah, I would say my number one piece of advice is, when you're feeling yourself be in a contracted state, find a way to bring yourself into a more expansive state, which can be anything from taking those deep breaths to walking away from your desk and getting yourself into a more creative space. And my second piece of advice is if you have the ability, budget or time, that you absolutely should work with an executive coach. I don't know a single person who has regretted the investment that they've made, and it absolutely can change the game in terms of your business performance, in addition to your own leadership skills.
Diane, that's great advice. Thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for your time on Innovator Cafe.
Thank you.
You've been tuning into Innovator Cafe, the entrepreneur go-to, with your host, attorney Dave Stevens. You can find more episodes on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the website, stevenslawgroup.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.